Dad's going out, you guys. Let's go see him.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to my first time on the track in a Swift DB1. I've always wanted to drive David Brunn's first creation. This was his first design, which was Formula Ford. And back in the day when I was racing, I remember when this car debuted, and it changed everything. It was such a leap from everything else that was out there on the track. Now, of course, new racing cars do that all the time. New car comes out and it outdates everything. This was different. It crushed everything. The Swift was so aerodynamically clean, such a compact package, and so radically different that everybody else was way behind. And if you wanted to win, you had to have a Swift. It was so crushing to everything out there that the SCCA wound up making two classes, one for the older cars and one for the more modern that followed the Swift. So anyway, it's a terrific car, very strong, very robust design, lots of triangulation in the frame, lots of driver protection. I remember having a conversation with Pat Prince, the fabricator, and he said he had one in the frame jig that he had built for Swift chassis that had done a 3-rotation barrel roll. And he said it fit right in, bolted right up, wasn't tweaked in the slightest. So to me, it sounded like a good, strong, safe car that was going to be competitive for a long time. And sure enough, almost 30 years later, Swift DB1s are still winning races in the SCCA. But I got this one because, well, they're vintage eligible, and so am I. And I'd like to do a little vintage racing. But before I tear the thing down and do a complete rebuild, I decided I would rent the track for half a day and put in a few laps on what I'm calling a play day. It isn't a testing session. It's certainly not a practice session. It's just go out and play with a Formula Ford. So we cobbled together a seat. My daughter and I worked together and went through the car from one end to the other and made sure everything was good, and took it out to the track on a cold April morning. And we had from 9 until noon. Now on that day, there were other cars. There were closed wheel cars there and no other open wheel cars. So they divided it into 2 sessions, even though I told them, hey, I can I can ride with these guys. I'm not worried about being out there with closed wheel cars, but they gave us 2 different sessions, which means I really only had 3 opportunities at the track for the day. So this is the first one, and we got the engine warmed up, got myself strapped in, and went out and did basically 5 exploratory laps. And my plan was to come in and have Lavinia check for any leaks or anything out of the ordinary, and then I'd go ahead and start playing. So I headed out onto the track.
Here and just drive, come all the way back to the front, come out here. Okay. Am I green?
Well, for this second session, I have every intent of picking up the pace a little bit, so I decided it was important to have the steering wheel on straight. Didn't want to pull a Tom Sneva and try and put it back on while I'm driving, so I just stopped in the pit lane, and everything seemed to true up after that. I thought, oh, that's a good omen. Time to get out here and start using the extra RPMs that I have. okay as we're starting to pick up the pace just a little bit. Don't expect me to break any records today. Let's talk through a lap. Gateway is best known as an oval, and coming down the front straightaway here, you veer into the infield before you get to the turn 1 oval section. There's a big bump going through there. You hit a quick downshift, and it's a very late apex. And you're apexing here and swinging out, and now you're into the back part of the course. Coming up on a set of S's, which is turns 3 and 4, I believe. 3, 4. You immediately have a little bit of a rise in the roadway here, and you have to cross over and get ready for 5. See if I've got this number, count 6. Correct. Into turn 6. This is a long, long neck stretcher of a corner with a very, very late apex. Quite honestly, when I was running the kart here, I never really did get that corner very well. Got to make sure you hit the apex late or you wind up out in the grass, which I did once in the kart. Turn 8 here, coming on to the oval again. Another late apex, but a really neat corner. I like it. There's reference points going into it, which I like. Here it's best to keep the car down near the line. And throughout the sessions, I was slowly working my way up in steady RPMs through that section that we just went through. I started out at 5,000 RPMs, then I went to 5,100. Eventually I got to around 5,600. I think if the car was set up right and if I was really driving it hard, you could probably come out of turn 8 and accelerate through that corner as hard as you possibly can to get plenty of speed down the straightaway. Didn't see any reason to try and do that today just because this is a play day and I'm going to take the car home and I'm going to go through it from one end to the other. Keep in mind we did have that little brake problem, and the idea of locking up one of the front brakes and sending me into the fence was kind of top of mind through this session. I just didn't want to take the chance on pushing things too hard. So anyway, that's a lap around Gateway, just briefly. And also, you noticed in the soundtrack, every time I go through the turn we just went through, the soundtrack sounds a little funny. The camera I'm using is a Replay XD Prime X, and it has a metal housing, which is why I bought it. I think it's a great camera in its construction compared to the GoPro. And but every time that metal touched the bar that you see in the foreground here, which is grounded to the chassis, the ignition would put interference into the soundtrack, which sounded terrible. I tried to null it out, but anyway, if the soundtrack sounds funny, you understand.
This is like a half-hour session, so we're only 15 minutes into it, and I'm wearing his glasses. They're pretty cool looking, aren't they? You probably can't hear me because it's so windy, but yeah,
What's that? Let's pull the seat out and get that cardboard out of there. How'd it look going down the straight?